We now move on, and it is my distinct honor and privilege to introduce our final speaker for this convention, Mr. Neil PARKIN, and he'll be presenting a session titled Metasurance. A round of applause for Neil PARKIN.
Should work, yeah.
There we go. Okay, shall we have some fun, everybody? So, what I want to do with you today is I want to time travel with you guys. So we're going to slowly start thinking about going back in time. So sitting here in 2023 at this lovely convention in person, I want you to step back into last year, 2022. Just before ChatGPT was launched, go back a little bit further. Probably skip over COVID, right? We don't need to go back anymore through that. We've experienced enough of that. Work our way through the teens, 2015, 2010. Remember the World Cup in South Africa, the fan walks, or the excitement. A little bit of this financial crisis in 2008, 2009, all the ramifications. And then in 2007, we see Steve Jobs taking the stage to launch 3 revolutionary products, which turns out to be the iPhone. Amazing thing. We go back into 2005. We're now in 2004. The Facebook is launched, this new thing where you can go online and check out other people's profiles and pictures. Of course, no privacy there. You kind of go into the early 2000s. We've just emerged from the dot-com bust. Things like pet.com sadly didn't work out. Apparently, you couldn't sell stuff online in those days. And then we could reach the year 2000 and 1999. And remember that thing called Y2K? We all thought we were going to die and it was going to be the end of the world. So all those nervous people in 1999, as we swing past them, we know that they're going to be okay. We see in 1998, this new thing called Google is launched. Imagine that, this new public thing called Google. We didn't have to use Alta Vista anymore. And we carry on all the way to 1995. And that's where we're going to stop. And how do we know it's 1995? Well, in the distance, you can hear the roar of the crowds as the Springboks win the World Cup final, which hopefully we'll hear shortly, right, in 2023. And out there, you're standing there at the World Cup. You were lucky enough to attend this final, and you see Mandela lifting up that World Cup, and you think, I'm going to take a picture. So what do? You take out your 3.2 megapixel digital camera that you've just received. You take a beautiful picture, you put it in your pocket, and later when you get home from the pub, you decide to get to your computer. And this is the other reason why we know it's 1995. It's Windows 1995, and when you dial up, it makes this little bleep noise. Remember that, guys? That's how we dialed up in those days. And you take the memory stick from the camera, once it's finally booted, and you put it into your computer, you copy the image across, you open your email client if you had one, you attach the image and send it to all your friends that you think you've got email. Right, that's the image. You close your computer and you go have a cup of tea. Next morning when you wake up, you'll check to see who got your email and what they thought about your cool picture of being at the World Cup. Now imagine in 1995, you said to somebody who had to go through all of that, in 10, 15 years, this thing called Google and Facebook is going to revolutionize the world, that you'll be able to push a button on your phone or just touch the screen and a taxi will come and collect you, that you'll be able to do the same thing and just rent an apartment from a stranger. In fact, you could swipe on your screen and date that stranger if you really wanted to. And all of this would be possible, that governments would fall because of your phone, that people would be elected as president because of your phone, that there would be this thing called cryptocurrency that would help fund wars and terrorists. And this is the world we'd live in 2023. They'd probably have looked at you and said, you are crazy. None of this stuff is possible. It cannot happen. It's very difficult to imagine in an era of how technology that doesn't exist can actually affect our social landscape. And if you look at the quote up on the screen now by Cliff Stoll, who is an astronomer and an author, he made the comment in 1995, the truth is no online database is going to replace your daily newspaper, no CD-ROM can take the place of a competent teacher, and no computer network will change the way government works. Obviously, he kind of rues some of those words today. But right, if we were in 1995, we'd feel the same way. And for us in 2023, this is our 1995 moment. We stand here, there's a lot of really sexy technology out there, including the metaverse, and it's very easy to dismiss it as hype. And I think if we do that, we rob ourselves of the ability to really think through the impact of that technology and, in fact, help change the way it works. So today I'm going to be talking to you about Metasurance and just giving a sense of where I think some of this emerging technology is going and the impact it's going to have on us. So first of all, what is the metaverse? So many of you will have heard this term, right? It was actually coined in a science fiction book in 1992, so even before our 1995 moment, by a person called Neil Stephenson, who actually came up with the concept of dialing in through virtual reality, and he called this place the metaverse. Now, obviously, Mark Zuckerberg stole it and called his company Meta, but that actually wasn't really what it was about. There are many definitions you can think of what the metaverse is, but for me, it's really this thing, this continuum, where you have this convergence with the physical and the digital, kind of coming together. And over time, we've really seen our lives move together, right? In 1995, much of our life was really not digital. It was more physical. And over time, the two have come closer together. And the technologies we see are bringing our lives even closer and closer to closer, until ultimately, that's really where the metaverse is. Something that happens in the physical world can affect your virtual world, and vice versa. Your virtual world affects your digital world. Anybody who loses their phone, then you'll know very well that your digital world can be affected, affect your physical world. Now, Sima Sistani had this comment. Sistani was the person who invented House Party. I don't know if you guys remember during COVID, your teenagers probably jumped onto this thing. You could jump into these chats and talk to each other. And she had this to say: if the last generation is about sharing, or the social media, the next generation of social is going to be about participating. And that's what the metaverse promises. It promises presence. So you think of all those Zoom calls you're on, the team call that you're on, they'd lack presence, right? And that's what the metaverse is about bringing, as Apple would call it, spatial computing, bringing people together. Of course, when I decided to do this talk, the metaverse was the hype. It's the next big thing. So I thought, well, that's a great topic. Let's do that. And coming into 2023, the headlines changed to this: RIP Metaverse. And really not a great topic to have chosen, right, when it can change so quickly. And in fact, a commentator even had this to say, all these sort of negative reviews that come up. New from me, metaverse is a consensual hallucination between Zuckerberg and the media, that cooking, dating, and nausea-inducing hours will be in a virtual realm full of legless avatars. And that's the unfortunate thing I think Mark Zuckerberg has done. He's created this image that that's what the metaverse is. And I think this is a great time to be talking about the metaverse, because what we know about the Gartner hype cycle, right? We know that people get very excited. Generative AI is another example. And then they get very disappointed and disillusioned because technology doesn't always work as quickly as we think it does. Generative AI is not a new thing, right? It became a hype last year, but in reality it's been in the making for decades. And the same with the metaverse. It's been through many iterations. And if you think of all the technology that underlies the metaverse, which is really an evolution of the internet, they're there, they're evolving, they're coming. And I think it's important to look at that. And I'll show you some of that a little bit today. But before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about brands. So looking at these brands, these are the top brands in 2020. And you look at that, Coca-Cola, not surprisingly, is at the top. Microsoft, Nokia is there as well. Remember the Nokia? You could play the worm and the snake thing on it. That was great fun. And then, if we look a little bit further into time, how much did that actually change? So who were the big brands in 2010? Well, we again see Coca-Cola there. Microsoft's still doing well, but IBM's pushing in there. Google's made an appearance. And if we push even further into time, who made it out? Who would you expect to be there? Apple, of course. Apple's now at the top. Amazon has come in there. Samsung is there with their Android phones as well. And even Nike, interesting, at the bottom. The point is, the big brands in 2022, some of them were not even there in 2000. And the question for us is, who's going to be there in 2030 or 2040? The brands that are building the technology of the future may actually not exist. And that's the important thing. We may be looking in the wrong direction. So who's that next startup that we might want to be think about and watch and maybe even invest in? Tesla, another example, becoming one of the biggest automotive brands in the world. And no doubt will make it onto that list into the future. All right, so let's look at some of the emerging technologies as we see it. So the elephant in the room, or the stochastic parrot, as maybe it's better called, generative AI. Many people have said, well, the metaverse is dead because AI is taking over. And the reality is AI is the fuel of the metaverse. There's no way you can create the kind of content, 3D worlds and visualizations that you need to drive the metaverse and these immersive experiences without AI. You're not having people program these things. And anybody who's used any image generator will be amazed by the magic and how these things can work. We're talking about text to video, text to audio, all these sort of good things. This is what AI promises. AI is going to help build this. And then augmented and virtual reality. Now, these things are really new media devices. There's been nausea-inducing hours, as he mentioned in that quote. These things haven't been great in the past. The reality is they are very new. The technology required to drive immersive experiences is really high-end. And we just haven't had that technology. We haven't had the processing capability yet to be able to deliver on the promise of having good virtual reality. But of course, it's coming, and I think we need to keep an eye on it. Now, some people say, why would you want to spend your whole life immersed in this 3D virtual world? And of course, that's not necessarily the case. Think how much time you spend on your phone or on your laptop screen. Virtual reality just promises to replace some of that. Nobody's saying you have to spend your entire life in a virtual reality setting. Of course, you're going to have people who do that, but you have people who spend their entire lives on laptop screens already. This is just going to change the way we experience it. And of course, Apple launched their Vision Pro at the WWDC earlier this year. And once Apple gets into something, then you know things are going to change. And this is really their vision of the future. Having these immersive experiences, imagine replacing your desktop. Every actuary's dream, right? You have about 6 screens around you, and they're as big as you want, the size of a football field. Now, this is expensive, $3,500. Most of us are unlikely going to be buying it, of course. But it's the Vision Pro. I expect Apple's going to be launching the Vision or whatever other version that's going to be cheaper pretty soon, and the technology will become cheaper and cheaper over time, particularly as the technology gets easier to make. And you look at the specs behind this thing, and it starts to tell you what Apple's envisioning. 4K resolution in the eyes. This is amazing technology. And Meta recently launched their Quest 3, very much following in the footsteps of Apple. It's immersive. You can use it for augmented reality and virtual reality. I think it's about $500. So again, much cheaper. Not as high end, but they're looking at mass appeal. And these devices will continue to iterate and get better and better. And we're going to start having more and more of these in our worlds. So keep watching this space. It's really happening. So I don't know if you guys saw this interview with Mark Zuckerberg, and this gentleman who does a podcast. This you'll see him wearing the goggles, chatting to Mark Zuckerberg, and on the far side is his 3D avatar. That's not an image, that's an avatar that's been generated, tracks his motions, and actually generates an avatar in real time. So if you look at the interview on YouTube, you actually see Mark Zuckerberg and him talking together in what feels like a very real environment. So this is more of the promise of where we're going, that we're not going to have those cartoony, legless avatars. We're going to have very hyper-realistic images of ourselves, bringing people together virtually when they actually can't be. So again, changing at breakneck speed. And AI is driving this, right? This is driven by AI. And this stuff is already in place. You might think, again, why use VR when you don't have to? But for the elderly, that's not always an option. Yes, it's great to travel to Italy or Venice or wherever you want to go, but not everybody has the capability to do that. So this particular product is used for seniors. They're able to experience connecting with family, gaming, into community, travel. It's better than watching a documentary, right? You can go through this virtual reality world. So again, a very healthy use of the technology. This haptics glove and bodysuit enables you to really be part of the virtual environment. Again, this is probably not quite where we want to be on a day-to-day basis, but for training purposes, this builds hand and muscle memory. So again, you're very much dealing with something in a virtual space. So I think this is going to be very powerful from a training perspective. And then there's this thing called H2L Technologies, which I think is backed by Sony, that can actually create virtual pain. And on that little thing on your wrist, much like if you've seen the Apple Watch, if it can pick up your motion in your arm, and it actually generates sensation and pain in your body by determining where you are. Now, why you want to create pain in the metaverse, again, I'm not sure, but maybe it'll help for all people who join Zoom calls late, they get zapped, or the guys who run meetings late, they could get zapped, I don't know. But there's many applications. We'll be creative about using these things right. And then Google's Project Starline, again, these are images, that's a screen that you're looking at, the woman with her child, that is on a screen, but they've used very fancy cameras and again machine learning to generate hyper-realistic images that makes you feel like you're present with the person as opposed to the very flat 2D screens. So again, immersion doesn't necessarily mean headset. It could be something very different. Our ability to connect and feel presence is likely to change with these technologies that are becoming more mainstream. And again, then every actuary's absolute dream, this kind of 3D screen, again, it's not a headset, but it's a very immersive screen that you can actually go out there and buy if you can convince your employer. But just showing you don't need headsets. The screens around us are very much likely to change and have a really very big spreadsheet. Whitney Houston, this is a concert. It's a hologram, actually, of good old Whitney standing in the middle and then real people around it. So this combination of this virtual world coming together with the real world. So I could be a hologram here today, and you wouldn't have to actually see me in person. And then you've probably seen these adverts, I think possibly Piccadilly Circus in Piccadilly Circus in London, and then this is in Los Angeles. You'll see it's volumetric, right? It's 3D, it stands out, and we're going to see a lot more of these. This is obviously professionally done with multiple cameras, but you can actually get apps that you can do things like this on your own. You can create 3D models of images and objects around your house. And touching on something that brings the virtual and the physical world together, NFTs. Probably all heard about it, right? It's called non-fungible token. Fungible just means you don't care which one you have. You've got $1, a rand, it's fungible. You'll trade one for the other. Non-fungible means you don't. It means something that's unique. So if you remember the first Twitter, you remember what a tweet was back in the day when there was this thing called Twitter? Jack Dorsey sent the first tweet, just setting up my Twitter. That was, the NFT of that was sold for $2.9 million. I think it's now probably almost worthless. Now, why somebody would pay almost $3 million for that, I don't know. And likewise, there was a disaster girl meme. You will have seen these memes around the internet. This was sold for the equivalent of $430,000. It was sold in cryptocurrency called Ethereum, but basically $430,000. Why would you pay it for an image which you basically can download off the internet? I don't know. The problem with these things is there's a lot of hype, right? So people do stupid stuff. And then what happens is we think NFTs have got no value. But really, an NFT is a token that confers ownership. You know who owns this token. And if you know who owns a token, you can suddenly give them things. You can list them in loyalty programs. You can give them voting rights. So very interesting use cases with NFTs once you get past the hype. This club, a Firefish Club, I think is in New York. You have to buy an NFT to go there. And if you have an NFT, you've got the right to attend this club. And so again, the virtual mixing with the physical, it's in blockchain. We know who owns the NFT, so you're an owner of it. And importantly, you can sell it on a secondary market. So there's a physical manifestation of it. For those of you into tennis, the Australian Open did something quite interesting from an engagement point of view. They sliced the court up into many, many little squares. And if the ball landed on your square, which you got the NFT for, then you won tickets to the 2024 Australian Open. So there'll be some happy NFT owners going there shortly, I guess. So many use cases of it. So just thinking of some general use cases here, there are lots of things we can get into. So I'm just going to touch on a few pieces. So obviously things like events, right? Virtual concerts. Now, why would you attend a virtual concert in sort of virtual reality? Obviously better to be there, right? But not everybody can be there. My daughter would kill to do a virtual reality Taylor Swift concert, I can tell you that much, because she's really not getting tickets from South Africa. So again, it brings things to people. If you look at sport, Apple's just bought a whole lot of rights to sports. There's no ways it's not going to make it into Vision Pro. Imagine being immersed in the game, volumetric cameras. You can actually walk around the cricket pitch or the rugby pitch, be between Eben and one of his unwilling victims as he runs into them. This stuff is going to be incredible from a sporting point of view. Snapchat, the owners of Snapchat launched augmented reality division that helps people try clothing on. So again, you can actually see how stuff fits. Shopping are the future, guys. So these things are coming. And then from a training perspective, this is going to be the biggest impact, I think, in the short term. There's something for surgeons to practice called Osso VR. You put the VR headsets and you practice surgery. So really great. You don't get to be the guinea pig, right? The surgeon has at least done it on a virtual guinea pig. And then Yark Driver, before you let a teenager loose in a car, they do a bit of virtual reality driving. Sounds like a winner to me. And there are many applications. Companies like Walmart, hospitals, many of them are doing this already because it makes sense, right? You see something, you do it in virtual reality much better than reading about it. In fact, there was a study that showed virtual reality is 4 times as effective than e-learning. So it just gives you a sense of where these things are going. Then obviously fitness, there's many sensors around our house. That one looks like a clip, goes on your toilet, measures stuff on your toilet. Again, monitoring us, ambient intelligence, feeding into our systems, telling us what's wrong with us, proactively managing our health, linking in with our physical world. And then obviously things like Peloton, Apple Plus Fitness, many of these virtual fitness programs linking us together. There's actually a virtual reality headset. You obviously have to be careful you don't fall off the thing, but again, they solve that problem. So it's much more fun, right, being in virtual reality while cycling against your competitors than just sitting on an exercise bike. Digital twins, this is an interesting concept where you make a virtual copy of something in real life. So as an example, the Hong Kong airport has a virtual twin of the entire airport. It feeds real-time data into where people and planes are so they can make decisions. Where do you send planes? Where do you send people? And it helps them manage the entire thing. It's basically a simulation on steroids, fed by real-time data. All right, so maybe some insurance use cases that I can whip through quickly. So again, leaning on that, there are many that we can use. So maybe looking at healthcare first, because I think that's an important one for us. So obviously we talked about telehealth, and telehealth is not just about a doctor dialing into your iPad, right? Again, it's that ambient intelligence feeding information to your system, understanding what's happening to your body before even you do. And then there's a whole pile of immersive therapeutics. If you look at that medical extended reality, for example, we've seen very positive impacts of treating things like PTSD for soldiers using virtual reality, helping people work through some of the horrific things that they've been through and seen. So a lot around that. Pain management as well. There's actually a virtual reality software and device that's been approved by the FDA for chronic back pain, helping relieve that pain. And there was even a study where they used virtual reality to help relieve women's pain during birth. Now, I think that's pushing things a bit far, right? I'm sure all the women would disagree with using that, but apparently it can be done. So there's that. And then meditation. We know about the meditation apps, right? Very useful for many people. Now imagine being immersed in that virtual environment where you are meditating. Again, just so much more powerful. There's actually an app called Trig that you can run off these virtual reality devices. So it's already out there and working. And then lastly, social health and loneliness. These things can connect people and bring people together who are separated by distance and can't always travel or be together. And because it's far more immersive, again, it's far better than something like a Teams call or a Zoom call. All right, and then modeling, we mentioned digital twins, and if you think of the insurance world, we do a lot of simulations, we do a lot of modeling, scenario testing, for example. You add some pricing to that, and there's a lot of applications where we can do this. Modeling portfolios, pumping in real-time data. If you add artificial intelligence to this, you can imagine the power of modeling in this space. And then marketing, there's so much potential in the marketing space. This is where our younger customers are. Gen A, Generation Alpha, Gen Z, they are metaverse natives, right? For all parents who have had to buy Roblox, Robux, and Fortnite, all of you Fortnite, right? These kids spend a ton of money on Fortnite. In fact, there's something like $25 billion spent over the last 5 years on virtual clothing and cosmetics in Fortnite. So it's amazing. These kids get it. So if we're going to market to them, this is where they're going to be at. And we need to build the communities to meet them there. And actually some very clever ways to launch products immersively, help people see the value of insurance from a marketing point of view. And leading into engagement, right? This is a very engaging platform. In the same way as we would have used YouTube or Instagram, this is just another way, another platform for us to do it. You can gamify things, you can use wellness, even virtual agents linked into this. Again, AI driven behind some of these things. So engagement, I think, will become a key piece of what we see in the metaverse. And then data ownership. An interesting philosophy behind the metaverse is decentralization, obviously with things like cryptocurrency being behind some of that. But what we've seen in the past is these big tech companies have really come to dominate what we have in the environment today. Think of the Googles, the Amazons, we're on the same social media platforms, and they really own our data, they own us, they own our experiences. Whereas in the metaverse, we're moving to a world where it's decentralized and we own our own data. And imagine the opportunities that opens up for us, right? Dynamic underwriting. We can ask customers to share their data with us rather than having to try to find third-party providers of that data. You think how we could augment wellness programs at just completely different level. The amount of data that is going to be captured about us is going to grow exponentially. And we need to be thinking how we want to use it responsibly, of course, but with the consent of people who now own their own data. From a training perspective, you think of the staff, think of all the challenges that we had to go through with Zoom. The same is going to be true when we start bringing in these devices. So as much as these devices will help with training, staff are going to need training to navigate this world. And we can extend that to everybody, right? Intermediaries, customers, how do they learn about your products, and how do they work from a sort of a complete holistic point of view. Distribution, what are the new worlds that we're going to be facing? New environments. So if there's a virtual world or communities that are being built up, how do we distribute into that, right? It seems a bit esoteric, but again, this is where our children live and where they're going. Who are the brands of the future? We saw how those change. Who do we partner with? And then does this new technology converge that in-person and sort of the virtual connections, right? This becomes powerful. It's no longer just selling over a call. And then again, those immersive events, I think, are going to be very powerful. All right, and then on to staff. We talked about the sort of challenges of training, mix of locations. We talk about hybrid world, but where are our staff actually going to be and how do we use this technology? Maybe it helps with engagement, right? We talk about how do we keep staff engaged in this hybrid world. If you have virtual environments that are deeply immersive, I think that becomes far more possible. And then lastly, just wrapping up with sort of other thoughts. What are the new products that emerge? There's an interesting product, for those of you who know Pokemon Go. Basically, you walk around looking for augmented reality monster things. Sorry to all those who play, I probably offended you. But basically, you end up with people walking around looking at their phones, right? Which is not the smartest thing always. So this product, this insurance product was launched that covers you if you get killed or get injured while looking for these Pokemon monsters. Yes, it's a strange new world, and I think we're going to see strange new products emerging. Even things like cyber theft, right? The risks there are going to increase over time. Loss of digital assets. And then talking about the ownership and trade in virtual currencies. What does that look like from an insurance point of view? And then lastly, just the operational technology challenges. This stuff is growing at quite a pace. How do we tap into those legacy systems that we need to think about? And then lastly, the chapter I want to talk about is risks. There are so many good things with this technology, but there are risks. Everything from regulators, how they perceive these new technologies, how they react or don't react. Social, political, economic and political risks, the degree to which people are left behind in this technology, the degree to which the economy has changed, the degree to which different countries and different regions have different powers. We've seen this with Facebook, right? Where this technology isn't always used in the way you think it will be. And that leads into privacy and data and cybercrime. These risks are going to escalate dramatically. When your life becomes increasingly virtual, your exposure to this does too. And then what is real? Generative AI has already created much of this problem. But when you're in a virtual world, how do you decipher what really is real? And then mental and social health. The risks here to social capital are significant. We've seen this with social media, right? There was this interesting study that showed how this impacts the US teens. So basically, in the smartphone era, which is that green bar there, you can see how the increase in proportion of US teens reported saying they don't feel good to be alive and they rarely meet up with friends. So again, the destruction of the social fabric of our society by the technology. And we don't want that. This technology is social media on steroids, right? So it's going to amplify this in ways that is hard to predict, but we know it'll make it worse unless we do something about it. Obviously, physical health risks, so people are sitting in these headsets all day, not necessarily the best thing. Increasing inequality at $3,500, not rolling out to everybody. This thing can be a dramatic boon for education, but only for those people who have the devices. There are solutions. You know, if we want them to be solutions. For example, what does an internet cafe look like in the future? Maybe it's a virtual reality cafe. How do we make sure that people aren't left behind? And then climate impacts. Might feel weird to talk about climate impacts with sort of artificial intelligence and with the metaverse, but there really is. To run these things takes an enormous amount of power, and just to cool the data centers is quite interesting. I read a study that says that for each average chat with ChatGPT, which we all go off and do, uses half a liter of water to cool down the data center, just for that chat. So every time you have a little chat with ChatGPT, you're using half a liter of water to cool it down. Obviously not sustainable. In fact, it's the biggest risk to generative AI in 2024 is the resources to manage the capacity of this thing. So again, a risk. And then lastly, overinvestment. Don't fall into the hype and run off and invest in these virtual worlds while they're changing so rapidly. So just some takeaways. Be aware of emerging technology, but ignore the hype. And it's true of AI as well. Upskill your staff. Don't leave your staff behind. Develop the relationships with companies who are involved in these things and are experts. And then importantly, consider your philosophy around the use of data and personal technology, however that evolves. And there's this great quote from Tim Cook, because really this is our moment to define how we want technology to look. We were very slack when social media companies ran with it. We kind of were quite naive when it all happened with us. If we had to go back, Facebook shouldn't look like Facebook, right? Instagram shouldn't look like Instagram with doom scrolling. We let that happen. This is our choice now to stop that from happening if we influence technology. Technology can do great things, writes Tim Cook, but it doesn't want to do great things. It doesn't want to do anything. Technology is neither bad nor good. We as society need to decide it. And as insurance companies, the insurance industry, we need to decide how we use the technology, including data, rather than getting carried away and excited by it. Much potential, but again, it comes with great responsibility. So I hope when I took you back to 1995, you appreciated the moments we were in then, how hard it was to understand how it affects our sort of social techno platform, really, as technology moves forward and so quickly with time. And as we look forward into the next 10, 15 years, how radically our lives and society might change and how we need to stay on top of it. So I hope you've had an interesting look at the metaverse and how the Metasurance might look. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil. That was a really interesting presentation. I suppose the question we need to decide is how do we merge the real and the virtual world to get the best of both?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we do not have any time for questions as we've come to the end of today as well as the end of the convention. I really hope that you guys enjoyed the past 2 days. I have really reached my quota. For those of you who don't know, I am an actuary, so I'm really tired of pretending that I do like the stage. But I just want to thank you guys for being a part of this 50th convention. So if we can all just give a round of applause to ourselves for this historic event. And then we'll close off this convention with a video or outgoing video from our President, Chart Esterhazen, and our incoming President, Costa Economo.
We've come to the end of the 50th ASA convention in a year where ASA celebrates its 75th anniversary. How special is that? I think we can all agree it was a great convention with great papers, debates, and plenary sessions. Thanks to all that attended and presented. Your participation and involvement made this event so much more special and engaging. As such, I also thank the organizing committee and Africa Agenda for putting it all together. Planning an event like this takes months. We appreciate the effort and the time put in to get us here. In particular, I thank Roxanne, the chair of the committee, the respective leads of the various work streams, Catherine, Chris, Logan, and Simon, the rest of the committee, and the staff of the ASA office under the leadership of Michelle. You've done a sterling job. Costa, as incoming president, I'm sure you also have something to say.
Thank you, Chart. I agree. It's been an absolutely brilliant convention. We've seen some great and very respectful debates. We've seen some thought-provoking papers, and we've seen some excellent presentations. Thank you to all of you that have made this possible and have made this happen. May the next 75 years see us not only lead, adapt, and thrive, but also lead with foresight, relevance, and innovation. Let's carry forward the legacy of excellence, commitment, and collaboration, ensuring our profession remains at the forefront of shaping a secure and prosperous future. Let's remain relevant to every South African out there. We're ending the convention in style with cocktails and a dinner event at the Aurum this evening. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody that has purchased their tickets this evening. Bring your dancing shoes. I have no doubt we're going to have a lot of fun. The convention would also not have been possible without our sponsors and exhibitors. I'd like to thank you all for the invaluable contribution you have made in making this convention the success that it has. I'm not going to read out all the names, but you can see them all on the slide. Without your support, this would not have been possible. Thank you once again. I look forward to seeing everybody next year in Cape Town. Until then, take care, be safe, and have a wonderful end to the year. Thank you.